Hi there, everyone. It is Wednesday. It's 1 o'clock. Welcome to the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, along with Edgar Zazwata, ACSA Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations. I'm Naj Alikhan, ACSA Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Go ahead and jump on our chat. Say hello. Let us know where you're watching from and what's happening in your district. Edgar, how are you today?
Good, Naj. Good to be back. I know we took a week off there for spring break, and hopefully our members got a little bit of a chance. I know that's a tough sell for a lot of our members when we're telling them to take a break, but it feels like they're always managing something. But I keep being super excited it seems by the day, the news, whether it be on social media or we just get emails about like every day more and more kids on campuses. It's definitely been a good time, I would say, for the system after a very difficult year. I just take solace in just the constant news from our members about what they're accomplishing in our schools.
I would absolutely agree with you. So now here's the big question. Since we weren't doing the show last Wednesday, but you and I seemingly don't actually have hours because of the number of times you and I have been talking late at night or over the weekend. Did you actually relax last Wednesday, or how much? let me ask it this way. How many hours did you actually work last Wednesday when you were supposed to be off?
I'm not allowed to count those things, Naj. I don't think that's allowed. It was a nice. This is what I like to say. Yes, we're busy here at ACSA, but it's we're at our busiest when our members are at their busiest, right? Yeah. So I think it's when we take pride in that and trying to help them out. And so, yeah, the pace never stops. It's always something, but at least it slowed down just a tad.
Just a bit. Want to say hello to Kendra and Tom, Jennifer, David Freitas. Let's see, who else? John Eberly, who is with us every single week. I saw Holly Eads on there, Maria Thompson, our great board member. Welcome to the show again. Go ahead and jump in and say hello. Let us know where you are watching from. We got a couple of topics we're going to talk about today. We've got Jeff Frost, the chairman and advocate for Ball Frost Group. He is going to join us to talk a little bit about what the governor is proposing from his news conference yesterday about reopening full in-person education for the fall. So we'll talk to him about that. And then Diana Vu is also going to be here to talk about assessments because we have news related to that. Edgar, of course, the news that came out yesterday from the governor, he expects to fully reopen the economy here in the state of California on June 15th, as long as there's sufficient supply of vaccines and hospitalizations are low. Obviously, still telling people, wear masks, get those immunizations, but he's also saying that there's the plan to end that color-coded blueprint for a safer economy in June. Edgar, your reaction. You and I talked. You and I were in a meeting literally about an hour after that announcement was made. Your initial reaction and what you're hearing out in the community related to what the governor announced.
Yeah, we'll definitely dive into them with, I have a lot of favorite people in Sacramento. You're yourself included, Naj. Jeff Frost, our guest today, is definitely one of those people. So I'm excited to jump into the conversation with him. The big takeaway, I think, for me was that we'll get into the particulars about what the announcement technically means, and I think it's going to be less about what the technical aspects of the announcement are, but I think the symbolic and also the administration very much projecting for all the fears about variants, for all the fears about where the pandemic may go in a fourth wave. And the governor stated that there's still some concerns that we have to make sure that we continue to be vigilant. They are very much indicating where the science, based on the science, they believe things are going, that things are going to continue to get better. The biggest takeaway for education is that when they acknowledge, and we had some conversations with the administration around this, for all of the questions about what should we plan for, what is kind of the basis, the administration is telling us, look, we are not only going to reopen the economy, get rid of the blueprint, which we're all going to miss, I'm sure. We spent hours on this show talking about purple, orange, red, and all the implications. But the bigger piece is that the expectations as it relates to education is that folks that full in-person instruction should be the default mode of instruction come the next academic year. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this.
We've been talking a lot about vaccinations, and I'm looking over at the discussion board because you and I normally have Michael Kelly as our executive producer. He got his second vaccination yesterday and is a little under the weather from it. I see Scott Smith, the great communicator over at ABC Unified. He's just announcing on the comment section, just received my second shot. Now the lunch break, a great Wednesday. All right, Scott. So we want to know, how are you feeling after this? Because we're having a debate back and forth about Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson and what the reactions are to that. So, Scott, go ahead and jump in and let us know.
I have to say, if Scott's able to watch the legislative lunch break, I think we got to give Michael a little bit of a hard time for taking a pass here. Just a little bit, right?
Just a little bit. Maybe we thought more about Michael than really we should have, because Scott's here. Who knows if Michael's even watching on this sick day? Who knows? Hey, we're going to move over to talk about the governor's other announcement about the expectation that all schools and higher education institutions are going to open up for full-time in-person instruction in the fall after the governor gets rid of that blueprint for a safer economy. As you would expect, it made a lot of news and creates a lot of other questions out there for all of us. So we want to bring in our first guest today to talk about this. Jeff Frost, chairman and advocate for the Ball Frost Group. His office, the worldwide headquarters of the Ball Frost Group, is actually in our ACSA offices. So
really bad.
So just so you know, I only get to see Jeff in the elevator. So about 200 people are going to see the longest conversation that Jeff and I have ever had. Jeff, so good to have you on the show with us today.
What do you want me to do?
I don't know.
Oh, did we lose Jeff?
It shouldn't be doing that.
I know.
We might have lost him. We can see him.
We can see him.
We can see him. Jeff, are you able to hear us?
Oh, wow.
Can you use the phone?
All right. Well, as we work to get Jeff back on here, Edgar, maybe you and I can. Jeff, are you able to hear us now?
I know.
It does not appear so.
Okay. All right. We'll continue to have our staff behind the scenes work with Jeff. Let me ask you, Edgar, and we'll ask Jeff this as well. Yesterday's announcement. What does that mean for schools? Because you and I, again, were in a meeting right after the governor's announcement yesterday, and we were trying to really decipher what was the impact going to be on schools when the blueprint goes away with full person instruction. What can we say about that?
Yeah, I think, again, just to elaborate of like my opening comments, or very technically speaking, this might have meant if we were having this conversation a few months ago, the actual real implications of them retiring the blueprint would have been more significant, right? Because there was different metrics. If you went into red, middle, secondary schools, high schools could open. Well, as we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, and it didn't get as much attention because most schools were already out of purple, the state had already changed the rules. They changed the rules as part of the CDPH guidance that said that even if you're in purple, and there was only a few counties at the time, I actually don't even know how many counties I think there's only a couple that still may be in purple, if that. But they changed the rules that even in purple, high schools and elementary and secondary could open. So that's why it was less about the technical aspect. It's more about this kicking off the bigger conversation about what's going to come. Distance learning, what are going to be the parameters around distance learning for the next academic year? I know everybody wants to know about hybrids, and we get Jeff back on, we'll go back and forth on that, on the hybrids. So from a technical aspect, it was less about, oh, this means for schools. It's symbolically about where the governor thinks the field should be planning for. It does also remind me to make one point that I think is important. All the guidance around the blueprint is still there. So Cal OSHA, CDPH guidance, that still hasn't been retired, and it's not going to be. Now, the governor's office has alluded to the fact that as we get closer, assuming June 15th is going to be the day, and they expect it will be, if hospitalizations stay low, if infection rates stay low, that's when they will retire the blueprint. That also means that they should loosen up some of these other recommendations, guidance around Cal OSHA, around CDPH. But I think the expectation is things like masking, for example. I think especially as it relates to schools, I think we could assume that the masking requirement will be with us for the foreseeable future.
I always appreciate that our viewers not only participate, and folks, if you have questions or comments related to the full in-person education at the start of the fall, go ahead and jump in, because we will get Jeff back on with us. Obviously, Edgar to jump in and give some comments as well. I love the fact, Edgar, that on our chat right now, I mentioned Scott Smith getting his vaccination and wanted to know how his reaction was. Now we're hearing from everybody. This is exactly the kind of thing that we love to hear and love to see. It's almost like a big meeting. I will point this one out. Parveen Ahmadi, our board member, who's the superintendent over at Castro Valley Unified, mentioned that Alameda County has 50% of the population having had at least one shot. So that is certainly amazing to see. Edgar, let me go ahead and ask you about, what do you think about this distance learning option then for next year? And I asked that because Derek Lennox, who's been on this show before and now is over at ACSA, he was talking about what comes next as far as, is there going to be an offering for those students, those families who are still not comfortable about getting their student back into the classroom? We know there are a lot of districts that are moving now to 4 days a week of in-person instruction. What about the distance learning option? Is it there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think this is an opportunity for us to distinguish in terms of what happened yesterday and what the assignment, what the actual implications are. Nothing that the governor announced yesterday has any bearing on to what extent distance learning is going to be offered or not. Frankly, that's something that's going to be worked out with the legislature. It's going to have to be put in the ed code. Now, with that said, and so the question we get, and I see Terry and others ask this, and I think we're going to get Jeff back in a second, and he could disagree with me if he chooses. If I predict, yes, I think it's a safe assumption that distance learning will be an option for next year, that it will be made available in some capacity. Will it look different? Will they put other parameters on it? Will they, there's talk about whether that will work through independent study. And if so, will there be some restrictions around that? I find it hard to believe that the legislature, knowing that there's some families who either can't or don't yet want to go back, that they are going to remove that option completely. Now, the last thought I'll say on this, and we'll bring Jeff back, is where I do think that there is going to be maybe more discussion. I don't think anybody is a huge fan of the hybrids. I don't think our members are frankly a big fan of the hybrids. And this is the concern that the legislature has been hearing from the constituents. Many of them have kids their own. They see that kids are only going to school a couple times a week for a few hours. I do believe that where things are kind of heading is that, yes, full in-person is the default. Now, will we have option for distance learning? Yes, but I would not be surprised if there's policy items put in place to disincentivize the use of hybrids in the next year.
All right, well, let's go ahead and bring our guest back in. Jeff Frost is with us, the chairman and advocate for the Ball Frost Group. And Jeff, I'm going to ask you two questions right off the top. What is yesterday's announcement about the full in-person learning mean for schools from your lens? And also, do you believe distance learning will be an option next year for those families, for those students that are not yet comfortable about coming back into school?
Hey, well, let me start with an apology for my internet going down at exactly the right time. So, sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I think the announcement from yesterday is exactly what ACSA, CSBA, all of our clients have been hoping for weeks now. I think it's a positive move by the governor. But as Edgar was saying when I just came on, the hard work is still yet to be done. I look at the announcement from yesterday a lot like I look at the governor's announcement in December during the Christmas break, when he said, all right, we're going to come back to school and we're going to have a funding plan that encourages people to come back. And I think the reality of that is that we saw that that was a lot more difficult to do than the governor's initial pronouncement. So the thing that I found the most interesting about yesterday's announcement, and it's not surprising that the governor made the comments that that the governor utilized his platform to make that announcement. But we have not heard at all from Dr. Bardock at the Department of Public Health. She has been conspicuously absent with comments or any announcements. My sense is that she might be less than totally comfortable with this decision. And because a fair amount of what in-person learning looks like after June 15th will be in part by Department of Public Health guidance, she's going to have a big role to play, and her department will have a big role to play along with county public health directors. So when we look at issues like, we have cohorts now. We have cohorts in middle school and up. We have cohorts in special education kids and other at-risk kids like English learners. My presumption is that the governor's pronouncement of full speed ahead is anticipating being able to do away with all of those kinds of semi-measures. And Edgar referenced the hybrid model, which is being used by most people right now. I think that there is a bias by everybody, our superintendents, our parents, that they want kids back in school full time without a hybrid model. So that last bit is sort of my lead into what happens with distance learning. I agree with Edgar. I'm in complete agreement on the fact that there are going to be parents that want to keep their kids at home, that they're not yet totally comfortable with coming back. Now, that could certainly change between today and the first or second week in August when everyone really gets going. And I think that's one of the problems that we have, is that I've talked to superintendents who are saying, I need to hire right now. And if I have 20% of my parents who want to keep their kid at home, I need to start hiring teachers specifically for distance learning right now. So if these parents think now they want to keep their kids at home, but then we get to the first week of August and they change their mind, that is another issue that creates real difficulty for all of our clients and for all of your members.
Jeff, I'm glad we worked out the technology issues and got you on board there. You just hit on something that I was going to ask in terms of I always respect your opinion, because aside from knowing what's going on in Sacramento, I feel like you have a really good sense, given the broad array of clients you folks represent, to kind of having an ear to the ground. Given some of the difficulties around planning and folks having to make those decisions, I mean, just based on what you're hearing from your clients, how are folks going about that planning process? Because they can't necessarily wait for the legislature to make all those decisions. So how's that working out in real time?
Well, not very well. I think the difficulty is that they're canvassing their parents now and they're getting certain types of feedback. And so, we get somewhere between 10% all the way up to superintendents who are telling us it might be more than 20% of my parents that want to keep their kids home. So if they round that off to a number that, say, 15% of your kids are going to end up wanting, or we're going to have to find a way to deal with them staying at home. You know, what does that end up looking like, and when do I have to hire people? Because if we're not in a hybrid situation where you have a teacher with half the class in and half the class doing distance learning, either simulcast in or other measures, you know, that's a challenge. And so when the governor says, no, we're going back full time with most all of the kids there, there's going to have to be a separate distance learning arrangement. It's not going to be some type of hybrid model, A, because it doesn't work very well, B, the legislature's not going to like it, and I don't think parents are going to like it when they have the option, hopefully, of bringing their kids back in a more robust, regular setting.
Hey, let me ask this to both of you, because my next question was for both of you, but this one came in from Victor Uribe, and he asked, is it possible to have a blended learning platform where you combine face-to-face and online or distance learning? Will they limit it to 10%? I think it's a good question, and I'll have both of you jump in on this. Edgar, I'll have you go first, because for many of you know, my wife is a kindergarten teacher, and there's the group that's in person now 4 days a week. There's another group that's still distance learning. And so there's a lot of planning, a lot of implementation that goes into something like that. And I know a lot of high schools are going to start moving into 4 days a week next week. What about that blended platform, the combination of the face-to-face, the online, the distance learning? What is your thought on that? Edgar, I'll have you respond first.
Yeah, it's a great question. And unfortunately, and this is going to be a theme, we don't know the answer yet. I mean, especially as it relates to next year, as Jeff just stated, the hard work is still ahead of us. The legislature is going to dig in on some of these details. And obviously, we're going to be right in the middle of this. We already have some meetings scheduled later this week to discuss what is it that the state is going to propose on that end. I think here's the thing when it relates to, and we've heard this perspective, I think the hybrids or trying to utilize, what are the lessons we learned from virtual learning? And in some cases, aside from the safety aspects of trying to limit the amount of students that were in schools, that there is maybe some ways that technology may be helpful now, right? Now, the word of caution that we've been saying to a lot of our districts and to a lot of our members over the last number of weeks, that when the physical distancing requirement changed from at minimum 4 to 6 feet to a strongly recommend 3 feet, that coupled with the education code that says in-person learning needs to be provided to the greatest extent possible, this is kind of the nexus of some of the legal fights we're seeing now from some of the parent groups around the state who are getting a bit more aggressive of pushing their LEAs to provide in-person learning. So that's just a word of caution there, that the old justification to have hybrids because we had to space students 6 feet apart is no longer there. And now I think that that's going to be a big question as we move into next year.
Hey, Jeff, let me ask you this, and Edgar, you can chime in too. What do you expect in terms of decisions from the state in the next couple of weeks as we move our way closer towards the fall, knowing that some schools are coming in for their fall semester essentially in mid-July? What do you see right now in terms of decisions being made here in the state?
I think the biggest issue is alerting the legislature and, quite frankly, the governor's office as well to the timing that school district leaders face right now in making decisions that won't actually happen until August or earlier, depending upon your educational situation. But for the most part, our districts are coming back in August. And they're starting to hire right now. They're starting to make structural decisions right now. And so from that standpoint, it seems to me that the legislature does need to act quickly to provide that kind of guidance. Now, quite frankly, if you look at how the legislature compartmentalizes itself, we spent a ton of time focused on the budget in February and March. They finally got the reopening done the budget subcommittees did an overview of the governor's January budget. And quite frankly, now they've stopped and they've pivoted to all the legislation that is before them. That will shift again in May after the governor's May revision, and when the legislature finalizes its budget, to be acted on by the second week in June. So I really think that if we don't have something that is addressed in the May revise that the legislature can act on, then we've certainly missed the mark. I don't see, just based on how the legislature operates, that they will pass emergency legislation ahead of the trailer bills. But I think our job right now is to be able to say to key legislative leaders and to the governor's office, we as an education management community need these 3 things or these 5 things. And in that context, we need to be organized in the next few weeks at most to be able to make that case and have some language that we can share with the legislature to try to move in that direction.
And we did get one more question that I did want to tackle. This comes in from Sarah Collegian, who's the superintendent over at Folsom Cordova Unified School District, a friend of ACSA. She says, and she's part of the discussion right now because a lot of the people in our chat are talking about the different types of platforms, the in-person or the online, the distance learning. Sarah asked the question, my district just submitted a request to CDE to start a new standalone virtual school. We need to proceed with hiring. Is CDE approving new CDS codes for virtual schools, or do we need advocacy? All right, I'm going to throw that to both of you. Where are we on this, and what really is, and Jeff, I would ask you especially this, as far as advocacy across the street inside the state capitol at CDE, what needs to really be discussed, what really needs to be said? But Edgar, let me have you respond to that first.
I don't know the particulars of what CDE is doing or not, but I will commit to Sarah, and I'm not name dropping here, but I just happen to have a meeting with Tony Thurman set up in a couple of hours. So on a similar topic. So I will raise this in terms of what can we do? They keep asking us the question in terms of what can we do to support the members of the field. Obviously, it's apparent our folks are trying to be innovative, thinking outside the box. I think this is one of the areas the state can support us on.
Jeff, what are you thinking about advocacy across the street?
Well, I just want to comment on Edgar's point. I don't know the specifics of Sarah's virtual school request, but I agree completely that CDE needs to be brought up to speed on what the field needs. I think what's happening in Folsom is a perfect example of how districts are trying to adjust to in real time to the needs that they're now faced with. And the concept of a virtual school to be able to keep their kids, have a control setting for this, in essence, distance learning environment where every district is going to have some of those kids, whether it's a large amount or small, actually needs to be done now. So kudos to Edgar for having that meeting set up. But I think it's just an example of how we need to query our own members and say, all right, look, now that this announcement was made, does it change how you're looking at the start of school for the next school year? And then we take that input truly in the next few days or within the next week or so and start to communicate that with the governor, with the Department of Ed, and with the legislature.
Jeff Frost, chairman and advocate for the Ball Frost Group. Jeff, thanks so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it. Let's go ahead and let's talk assessments, Edgar. I want to read just this opening paragraph right here from Sydney Johnson's piece in EdSource. It says, quote, California education officials have been told verbally that the state may not need to submit a waiver application to the U.S. Department of Education, thus opening the door for more flexibility this spring when it comes to standardized testing as school districts continue to navigate reopening plans during the pandemic. So let's go ahead and bring in our other guest here as we cross the bottom of the hour. Diana Vu, legislative advocate, ACSA Governmental Relations Department. Diana, so good to have you. What is the latest update that we are getting on assessments from Washington, D.C. and from Sacramento?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Naj. And thank you for referring back to the EdSource article as well. So let me backtrack a little bit. Several days ago, CDE and SB had a phone call conversation with the federal government. ED stated California would not have to submit a general waiver, just as it was quoted, as you quoted in the EdSource article. So CDE and SB decided to send a confirming letter to ED anyways, and the response to the letter is a little interesting. And in our best interpretation is that it ultimately leads the same result. Local assessments are still acceptable, but only if the pandemic has made it unviable to administer summative assessments. In addition, ED did, however, explicitly approve decoupling the assessments from the accountability systems. This includes the penalty for not meeting the 95% threshold.
So Diana, just because I know even when we try to give out the information, obviously folks are in the heart of this work, right? And they're trying to make sense of all this. So I'll ask, I'm going to throw you a softball here. So can our members plan on just offering local assessments? Do they have to offer the CAST, the SBAC assessment?
So the issue is still evolving, but our best read on it is yes, LEAs can still administer alternative assessments if the pandemic has made administering the statewide summative assessments not viable. The key here is that it seems to be on a determined on a case-by-case, district-by-district level. In addition, any alternative assessments need to follow the state guidance, which I've said so many times. I'm sure nobody wants to hear me say it again. But if anybody does, shoot me an email. I'll send it over.
Yeah, and just to follow up on this, for those superintendents on the show in our week, many of you join us for our weekly superintendents meetings that we have. We're going to have Tony Thurman on tomorrow, and you can guarantee this will be issue number one that we're going to ask him about. And I know he'll be prepared to give a statement. So that's, like Diana said, that's our best interpretation of like this mumbo jumbo that we're getting. And obviously the caveats, things we'll have to wait till it's finalized. It definitely looks like it's going in that direction.
Well, actually, Diana, that brings us to ask the question, what comes next? Do we expect more information? What's kind of the timeline if we are expecting more information?
Sure, absolutely. So yes, we are expecting CD to provide us some guidance and clarification on the letter, hopefully sooner than later. I heard it was sometime today, but I also heard that they were going to provide us guidance on Monday. So I would take that with a grain of salt, but soon.
All right, Diana Vu, ACSA legislative advocate from our Governmental Relations Department. Diana, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Edgar, what's funny is I'm looking at the chat, and you should probably just text Tony or call him or his comms team right now, because the number of questions that are in here that you would have to field to give to Tony based on our topic today. He's going to be working hard ahead of that soups meeting tomorrow.
I'm sure he'll come prepared. But yeah, no, Gary's question, I'll just touch on that real quick because I know that's at the heart of this. And I think to Diana's point, it's a little ambiguous. Our interpretation is that it won't be on the districts necessarily to do anything to say whether they can or can't administer it. We believe that that's directed at the state. So that's the part where we're going to be looking for some direction from the state in order for the LEAs to just go ahead and offer local assessments. But that's where we're going to need slightly more clarity from both the state and the feds.
All right, folks. Ledge Action Day, next Wednesday, April 12th and 13th. We're not going to be on the air next Wednesday for the Ledge lunch break because we have an expectation that all of you are going to be signed up and registered for our free Legislative Action Day. Edgar, you're running point on all things Ledge Action Day? What can our viewers, our members expect?
Yeah, I'm excited. I've said it many times over the last couple months. Obviously, we're bummed not to have the Capitol filled with our members. At some point, we will get that back. But when, you know, what's the saying? When life offers you lemons, you make lemonade. And I think our lemonade is going to be pretty good next week. We have great guests. We have more members signed up than ever before. I think this virtual capability gives us a lot of other options that we've never had. These issues around distance learning, assessments, we're going to have the people at the heart of this conversation. So everything we're talking about today, all of you that were offering opinions, this is the perfect opportunity to go ahead and get your voices heard. So I'm really excited about it. Naj, I may even join you in the ACSA office for this.
Yes.
But I make a point, I'm never going to see you in person again. I'm going to stay in my office, secluded. We can't mess up this dynamic.
Exactly.
You know, I think for both of us, we've probably done some of our best work in shorts over the last 12 months.
Agreed.
I have to change, maybe, but I'm looking forward to next week.
Yeah, you know, folks, the Ledge Action Day next week, the 12th and the 13th, it's 2 half days. It's half day Monday, half day Tuesday. Edgar and I are going to be hosting. We have a number of guests on there. Connie Leva is going to be there. John Laird is going to be there. Patrick O'Donnell is going to participate. Kevin McCarty is going to be there. Tony Thurman, who Edgar is going to be speaking with in just a matter of moments and has a whole list of questions to pass along. He is going to join us as well. Your opportunity to interact with our lawmakers in the same manner that you interact with us here on this show, the opportunity to see the bullet points and the information and the white papers, all while sitting in front of your computer, just like you are now. If you want to register for that, it is April 12th and 13th. You can go ahead and register for that free event. That is at ACSA.org. And Edgar, as we get ready to close here, I wanted to point this out because this is really something that our boss, ACSA Executive Director Wes Smith, says to us a lot. And it came in from William McGee. He says, we should not be teaching the same way we did when we were in the building. Wes tells us almost every single time he talks to us, if we go back, I'm paraphrasing, if we go back to the way we were doing things pre-COVID, then we have a missed opportunity for all of us to grow and do things differently. I'm paraphrasing that, Edgar, but I think you would agree, and I think our viewers would agree, that just simply going back to what we were doing previously would show that we have a missed opportunity here. And I'm hoping that our educators are seeing that this really is an opportunity.
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the head, Naj, and I think some of our members in the comments today kind of segueing back to next week and this opportunity. I think this is an opportunity for us to tell the policymakers, yes, and I think you've heard it loud and clear from ACSA. We believe that let's give the opportunity for kids to get back to in-person learning to the greatest extent possible. With that said, what have we learned over the pandemic? What tools did educators not have that we had out of necessity in the last year that maybe it's worth keeping around, right? And I think this is, we've said this a lot of times this year because we've been fighting a lot of fights. But once again, we're coming upon a time where some really, really critical decisions are going to be made. And I think our members are well positioned to inform that policymaking process.
And we just had that link put into the chat for you to register for the free Ledge Action Day event, April 12th and 13th. Edgar, so good to see you today, man. You and I, wall to wall next Monday and Tuesday. Should be good.
Yeah, I hope a lot of folks join us. I think it'll be a good couple days.
I agree. Thank you, folks, so much for joining us here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Again, join us for Ledge Action Day beginning next Monday, bright and early in the morning, 2 half days of really, really great content and your opportunity to interact with the decision makers at the Capitol. We will see you then. Have a great rest of the day and great rest of the week.